You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
This episode of The Projection Booth is brought to you by Ovid.tv. Ovid.tv is the independent streaming home for people who want to watch foreign films, thought-provoking documentaries, and art house gems that are impossible to find anywhere else. For just $6.99 a month, you'll have access to a cornucopia of films to watch anytime and on any device. Vanity Fair calls Ovid.tv a fantastic streamer for people with a taste for foreign, political, and otherwise beyond the American mainstream films. Discover art house titles, documentaries, works of global cinema all in one place. Start streaming at www.ovid.tv. Highlights include the 4-part docuseries The Hitler Chronicles, which charts Hitler's improbable rise, his mastery of imagery and crowd psychology, and his consummate skill in exploiting the weakness in others. From now until October 21st, 2020, save 50% off your first 3 months of Ovid.tv. Just head on over to www.ovid.tv and sign up with the coupon code PROJECTION at checkout.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm Mike White. Joining me today is Mr. Jim Donahue.
Permit me to flap my flapper at you, Mike.
Also back in the booth is Mr. Noel Thingvall.
Wait, didn't we record this yesterday?
This is Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea, from a script co-written by Milos Macourek. The film stars Petr Kostka as both Jan and Karel Bures, twin brothers, one who helped invent a rocket that allows people to travel through time, the other who pilots it. A group plans to rent out a rocket just for them, and rather than going back to do a little sport hunting in the time of the dinosaurs like Ray Bradbury's The Sound of Thunder, they want to go back to 1944 and speak to Hitler. Let's just say that things don't go as planned. And we begin somewhere in South America. We've been debating whether this is Buenos Aires, Rio, someplace in Peru. We definitely are setting the stage for some Nazis who have escaped the war. And we are catching up with some of our main characters here. And this is, it's directed by Jindrich Polak, who had done some sci-fi, though that wasn't necessarily his forte. I'm curious, have you guys seen any of his films before?
I did, in prep for this, I watched Ikari XB1, which is magnificent. And then I did watch a handful of episodes of his 70s children's TV series Pan Tao, which is really quite wonderful, and in fact stars the guy who plays the American husband in this.
And this is my first viewing of his films.
I love this opening.
Yeah, this is
fantastic. Especially this music is fantastic.
Now, Mike, had you seen any of his films before?
I had. I'd definitely seen Voyage to the End of the Universe, and I'd seen it both in that form and in the original form.
Oh yeah, I got the Polish Blu-ray. It's great.
I was more familiar with Milos Macourek's films because he has written just a ton of things that I've enjoyed, and also Josef Nezvadba, who I'd also seen his I Killed Einstein Gentleman, which is very similar in a lot of ways to this. And both of those gentlemen, Milos and Josef, had worked on this and I Killed Einstein Gentleman.
And thank you for sharing that movie as well, because that was an absolute treat.
Yeah, I love older Chlipsky films, and he just always made so many great ones. Macourek had written a bunch of things with Lipsky, and just they had this anarchic feel. And so many of the actors are the same as that. If you had shown me Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea without telling me who directed it, I would have said that it was Ulrich Lipsky.
They do feel like films by the same guy, yeah.
Yeah, because you've got Vladimir Mesnik in here, Vlastimil Brodsky, Yuri Sovak, just so many very familiar Czech faces in this movie, and especially people that had worked with Lipsky just a ton.
Well, here's a question for you. What do you feel are some of the stylistic things that differentiate the directors?
I am not sure. I haven't seen enough Polak films to say what his stylistic intentions are compared to Lipsky. Lipsky is very anarchic, and this film has that feel to it.
I love that shot of her face.
This feels a little bit more sedate to me.
Yeah. And I gotta say, this is my introduction to Czech cinema, which has been interesting. And I know you usually do a Czech spotlight every year. But yeah, no, I had never really sat down and watched any of it before. And looking around, it's interesting how hit and miss it is in terms of availability. Some of it is like really easy to find, and other stuff, like we've talked in the past about The Death of Tarzan, that's hard to find.
Yeah, and there's another one that was based on, actually a few that were based on Nesvadba's works that are just, I mean, Miss Golem I can find, but I cannot find the subtitles for that. I think The Lost Face is the same thing, but yeah. Then there's one where I don't even want to try to pronounce it, Bibik Z Zenmunde, which...
The Half-Wit of Xenamud. That's one of his stories. And that's on the same DVD as Death of Tarzan, because they're both short films. They were released as a package. But yeah, no subtitles.
When I heard about this movie the first time, that these guys were time traveling back to the time of Hitler, for sure I thought that they were going back to kill Hitler. But no, they're going back to help Hitler.
Absolutely thought the same thing.
It's the Nazis.
Because we've seen that so many times or heard that story. If you could time travel, would you go back and kill Hitler? I had never heard, would you go back and help Hitler win the war?
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Yeah, I love that we have two films where that's not the plot of either one. One is let's go back and help Hitler, and the other is let's go back and kill Einstein.
I love these guys all in their white coats, and they're just so full of themselves.
I should point out, we now know the film is set in, I believe, 1996, based on his age.
But thank goodness they're all taking anti-aging pills.
There's not enough neon and flannel.
Yeah, strangely, they seem to, most of the clothing looks like 1977 to me.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
Not all of it. I mean, I'm not sure what this woman is wearing. That's kind of timeless.
Yeah, that orange shirt is classic.
Now, and I have to apologize in advance if I get anyone's names wrong, but the lead Nazi, Jiri Sovak, who was also the lead in I Killed Einstein. Both these films have made me such a fan of his. I just want to track down more Czech cinema just to see more of his work.
Yeah, he's pretty great.
He's fantastic. My favorite is Vladimir Mesnik, who is, what's his name, Kraus in this, that they bring along, I guess, as muscle or something.
The Bucktooth Walter Matthau?
He doesn't fit in with the Nazis, and he doesn't fit in with the pilot. I guess he's just there as a hired hand.
Yeah.
He's a thug.
He's a kind of an ineffectual thug, though.
Yeah, he's not the best, but I'm assuming that's why he was hired.
Yeah.
It's not really made clear.
I never put that together, because I always just thought he was one of the Nazis, but yeah, he is a hired goon.
Yeah, because he's outside of the room when they're initially meeting and brought in with, is it Gregor, the pilot, setting up the entire plot here. I love this kind of Ocean's 11 narration, talking about what they're going to do. And then that Kraus is just such a lech. taking pictures of people sunbathing.
It's like a reverse heist movie where they have to undo the plot. I love just the weird sound effect over the car trunk. And then the tone every time they're just announcing in the airport, please go to gate 2 and,
It's like a sound of thunder where people are taking these different time travel excursions.
Remember the advice your father gave you on your wedding day? If you ever travel back in time, don't step on anything, because even the tiniest change can alter the future in ways you can't imagine. Fine. As long as I stand perfectly still and don't touch anything, I won't destroy the future. Stupid bug! You go squish now!
Nice they have bargains for kids.
Well, it's good. It's like field trips.
The National Theater Fire is a real thing. Late 19th century in Prague, it burned down and was considered a national tragedy.
Yeah, and I suppose we are in Prague now, though they had made a stop in Washington, D.C. to pick up a hydrogen bomb.
Yeah, that bridge that we saw them in, standing on a minute or so ago, is in Prague, and unless all bridges in Prague look the same, I believe I crossed across that one. I went to Prague about 15 years ago.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, beautiful city.
I've always wanted to go.
Oh, highly recommended if you can. At the time, it was a cheap package deal. If you can get a cheap package deal, go.
Well, who knows after this pandemic how expensive or cheap flights are going to be.
Prague and Budapest. I'm glad I got to Budapest before the fascists took over.
Cheap package to Prague is basically an entire decade of the Sci-Fi Channel.
So here we've got Petr Kostka, who was quite a staple in Czech cinema. He's got, I don't know how many credits to his name, 216.
He's got that amiable leading man quality.
Though he can play, here he's Gregor, and here he's a jerk, and now he's Jan. And Jan, well, he's not necessarily the best character in the world. It feels like he's afraid of his own shadow.
He's anxious.
And here we have the titular scalding with tea.
We have title.
At least he doesn't say it in the movie. We don't have to stand up and applaud.
You would think in a world where you can literally just dissolve all your dishes, there would be better treatments for you casually burn yourself than having to fully bandage his arm.
I really want to know the specifics about the dishwashing detergent that dissolves everything. Do you have...
There'd be so much murder in a society with that.
But also, do you have, 10 sets of stoneware in your closet? I mean, you're going to go through them pretty fast.
I think it was around this time that they were saying that in the future we'd all be wearing paper clothing.
Well, we are, technically, at the moment.
I do have to point out just how good these split-screen effects are.
I was very impressed.
Yeah, this one especially.
Considering I doubt the budget on this was very high, they're very well done.
And they know when to use body doubles, like in the previous scene when we have him in the background and him in the foreground, and it looks like it's probably a body double in the background, but he's dressed exactly the same, has the same haircut, so it looks really good. But yeah, here, him interacting with himself, this looks heads and shoulders above things like...
Watch the eye line.
Yeah, the eyeline's great. It's so much better than, what was the one with Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin?
Oh, Big Business? Hey, that's a fun movie.
It may be a fun movie, but it's got terrible special effects.
Yeah, I won't deny. So if you were choking, would you roil around on your bed or would you run to your brother who's in the other room? Granted, caught in the moment, you never know what you'll do.
I don't know. Yeah, if you panic.
Quick, drink some of the dishwashing detergent. That'll take care of it. Seriously, that dishwashing detergent, it's like, that would be a massive thing to introduce to a society to just casually dissolve away things. There are so many implications to what you could do with that.
I heard swallowing it cures the coronavirus.
I know, right?
That's true.
And that's the big thing, is going through just the handful of Czech things that I've seen in the last few months. I'm really impressed by their effects work, and especially like Ikari XP1 had incredible matte and miniature work. Pantau and what was Inventor of Destruction had just this astonishingly realistic and nuanced stop motion animation. There was some incredible effects work going on in that country that you just don't hear about.
Karel Zeman was so inventive, and then you even had Jan Svankmajer working on a lot of things, and sometimes he'll get credit, sometimes he doesn't, but take a look at Dinner for Adele, which he did with Lipsky, where he does all of the creature effects in that. It's fantastic.
I saw Invention for Destruction as a kid at a Saturday matinee under the American title, The Fabulous World of Jules Verne, and I swear it's one of those movies where if you see it as a kid and then don't see it again for a long time, you begin to wonder if you dreamed it, because it's so unusual looking. It doesn't seem like it could possibly be a real movie. And when I finally figured out what it was, I was very happy.
Yeah, and I just came across it because Criterion just did a random tweet about it with some stills, and I'm like, ooh, that looks interesting. And I didn't even know it was a Czech film. And yeah, astonishing how they just take you into that world. And I also want to check out their Baron Munchausen. But anyways, back to this movie. Quick question. So did everyone read the short story?
I did.
I also did, yes.
Kind of remarkable that they bother buying the rights, because basically the only thing they use from it is the fact that time travel happens in a rocket.
Or that the day repeats, yeah.
I'm always curious when the idea of a repeated day, now it's very, very common to, even on just a regular old sitcom, you'll get an episode where it's a repeated day. And you see this over and over again. I mean, some of my favorite Star Trek The Next Generation episodes are repeated time. And to have this as this film so many years before probably the granddaddy of them all, which is Groundhog Day, I am very curious when that became a thing. When was that instilled as a trope?
So it's interesting that in the short story on which this is based, when the day repeats, our hero doesn't run into himself, which is such an important part of this film.
It's not the typical Groundhog's Day. It's more the Back to the Future 2 type thing about how you're just adding another you to the timeline.
If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit.
I don't know if either of you guys watched the German Netflix series Dark. Highly recommend it, but there's a lot of multiple versions of people at different ages interacting or viewing themselves and sometimes talking to themselves. It's really well cast, with the younger and older versions greatly resembling each other. Whoever cast that show did a fantastic job.
Anyone else struck by, I mean, it works perfectly fine as a comedy. Anyone else struck by just how quickly he adopts his brother's identity?
Well, they're twins. They can practically finish each other's sandwiches.
And it's all because he didn't want to upset the other guy's fiancé. But then it's like, well, what was your plan after that?
Yeah, what's your end game?
I don't think it's typical to bring in a coffin to bring the body away. That was an odd touch. Who knows what goes on in Prague, though?
It's future times.
Sure, it's 1996.
That coffin, bringing the coffin straight to the crime scene was all the rage back then.
It just saves some steps.
Nice coffin, too.
Yes, the suits are in the closet, of course.
It's just such delightful wordplay.
Now, what about the armchairs? Did the subtitles leave something out here? Because I feel like we missed something.
I'm not sure what he means by the armchairs. If it's weapons, like arms, or...
Yeah, that wasn't set up. The suits being in the closet was set up, but not the armchair.
I know they're talking in code and he doesn't realize it, but yeah. A lot of this film, it just kind of drops you right in. But in a good way, in a way I appreciate it, because it kept me on my toes and it kept me interested. And I kind of like this idea that the one brother is the pilot, but the other one also knows how to pilot because he designs the rockets.
Yeah, that was nice, so that we didn't have a lot of him just sitting behind the controls going, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, they could have gone like full Clouseau with this movie. And I kind of like that they still kind of kept him just kind of a laid-back guy.
This whole thing with the watches is nice too, especially in a time travel movie. Yeah, I really liked Nesvadba's stuff. I read quite a few of his short stories. You're right, though. There was so few things that were similar to this.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if... Well, and again, I just kind of found that story blindly because both IMDb and Wikipedia say the story is has the same name as the movie. That was not the case with the story I found, so I don't know if maybe there's an additional one. But even looking through the Czech titles of the stories that haven't been translated, I couldn't find one that had the same title. And even the Einstein, I Killed Einstein, I couldn't really find a story that lined up with that one. Unless we're just going with the same time travel thing, because there's the Einstein brain as a story, but it was a very different story. But yeah, no, it was fascinating digging through his stories, because I know I still didn't read all the ones that you had posted, and I know you all didn't have time to read all the ones that I read, so it's like we both kind of read different halves of his output.
One of the ones that I did read was the new Dr. Moreau, which is one of the most grotesque things I have ever read.
That's a dark one, yeah. It's a whole a future where surgery is obsolete, but there's this whole people that become obsessed with body modification as a way to travel to the stars. And I love his stories. Just have such a wonderful psychological high concept pitch like that.
Well, wasn't he actually a psychiatrist?
Yes.
As his other job? Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of the times he will set up his stories as if they were confessions from patients. There are a few stories that I read that way where he would talk about the patient coming to him with these strange things going on. And I'm reading it going, isn't this violating ethics? And I'm like, oh, wait, no, this is a science fiction story. I have to accept that.
Yeah, and there were two things that I kind of noticed echoed through a lot of his stories is, one, it's basically more a psychological breakdown of how people react to a situation. And also with a very sarcastic sense of humor. He was very funny. And also he had a lot of stories that kind of explored, I almost want to say, a singularity type thing where machines reach a point where humans no longer need to work or worry about anything because machines take care of it all. And he had multiple stories that all revolved around that idea. And it then became this whole existential question where if you never have to work for anything, what does it all mean?
I thought that I was going to unlock the secret of this movie when I found a story where it was a man who was captured by the Nazis. He took the place of another person who had the same face, and so he was going to go in and find out what this big secret weapon the Nazis had were. And then he goes in, and this woman shows him to a room, which is actually a cell, and then all these women start coming in and having sex with him.
Like the last plan of the Third Reich or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, I read that one too.
That's it, exactly. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, this is probably what Tomorrow I'll Wake Up is supposed to be. But no. No, it was just this whole thing of basically taking this guy's progeny that he makes with these 4 women and raising them up incredibly fast, and then it's going to be a whole new army for the Fuhrer.
Which then fails because they have daddy issues. There's a really biting sense of humor to his stuff.
So the 7 Roses thing, is he just cheap, or is that a thing? I mean, come on, spring for a dozen, man.
One for each day of the week. I have no idea.
You're a romantic, Noel.
It's not too much and it's not too little.
You're probably right. He was probably aiming for that.
He is a very Goldilocks middle of the road guy.
When this that he's now pretending to be his brother and meets with this fiancée of his.
The fiancée who's part of a traveling carnival.
Or soon-to-be fiancée. I love that the circus performers just take up the entire roof of this place. The very precariously placed trampoline.
Yeah, boy, that could get someone in trouble, couldn't it? Foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's like this one, a lot of the Nesvedba stuff, you can see like these very distinct themes that he's trying to explore. This one, it's kind of hard to figure out, well, what exactly are they trying to explore? The meaningless of trying to change the past, the meaninglessness of his identity, that he actually will now be happier as someone else. I think it's mostly just, it's a delightful comedy, so it doesn't care, but...
Yeah, I can see that. I also see that the brother's death is actually a good thing, as is the death of all these Nazis, and then trying to give Jan the best life that he can have.
That's a good point, too, yeah.
It's a double happy ending, to jump ahead.
I Killed Einstein, I get it, where it's this whole, ultimately you're not going to, changing the past isn't ultimately going to help anything.
Yeah, that one is much more of what I expect. That one, speaking of A Sound of Thunder, is much more it's more like the Simpsons parody of A Sound of Thunder, where Homer keeps going back and killing different things and then comes back to different futures. And so when they go back and they're trying to kill Einstein and accidentally kill one of the explorer's fathers, that he just goes away completely and then changes everything around him.
I still think that would be a great pitch for a TV series, is Let's Kill Hitler. And it's literally the first episode is they go back and kill Hitler, and then you have to deal with all of the spiraling consequences. And literally every episode is them trying to figure out, here's a whole bunch of new stuff. If we can shore that up, can we still kill Hitler? If we shore this all up, can we still... And like the end of season 1 is, okay, now we got to go back and save Hitler. And then they have to go back and undo everything that they changed. So it's like, I love the concept of that.
Noel, I think you could sell that. I would watch.
I think I would like that better than the second 2 seasons of Man in the High Tower.
What? Frank Spotnitz did a confusing show? What?
I've seen the reboot of Kolchak. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's the only Kolchak I've seen, sadly.
Oh, man.
What? There was a reboot of Kolchak? When was that? I missed it.
You Sweet Summer Child.
2005. Yep.
Who starred?
Stuart Townsend.
Oh, okay.
It's definitely a Kolchak post X-Files. And it's trying to be cool and sexy.
Yeah, but having spoken to Spotnitz, he was between a rock and a hard place. Just that they wanted to do Kolchak but without any monsters, which is pretty much impossible. I really think that these space helmets were very inspired by 2001.
Oh, yeah. And they have that similar kind of real look to them. I mean, that's what I like about this movie, is for as high concept and silly and whimsical as it is, it still has a very casual portrayal of the future. Excepting, cave girl bikinis.
Oh, that's documented fact. I saw that in a film.
Yeah.
Another film. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 1 million years BC, right?
I think it starred that actress who was Welsh, right?
Yes. Of course, we're going to get the whole confusion of the suitcases, which is a classic staple.
Love Shirley.
Oh, Shirley and Patrick.
And again, I highly recommend checking out the series Pan Tao. The entire series is on YouTube without subtitles, but it's primarily pantomime. It stars the guy who plays the American husband as just this alien in a bowler hat with an umbrella who comes to Earth and has these whimsical pantomime adventures with children.
Oh, wow.
That sounds great.
And it's really delightful and fun.
I like that this guy can just get through life not knowing where to go, what to do, and just everyone looking out for him and then shaking their head when he's out of sight.
But I also love how they then build the contrast between this and then the next time that he loops in
It is nice, yeah.
He's a fast learner.
Yeah.
And that's what I like, is that this guy, Jan, is not dumb. That he's not conniving by any means.
He's fallen into a situation that, why would he know what to do?
How dare they allow Pat and Shirley on this flight?
Oh, bless you, Pat and Shirley.
Yeah, the little guy back there with the glasses, he has been in so many movies, and he can play this kind of blundering person, can be really sinister, or just a normal guy. And I that's what I really appreciate about him, is just that he is so versatile.
Yeah, even just glancing at everyone's IMDb pages, even though I'm not familiar with a lot of Czech cinema, a lot of these had incredibly prolific and varied careers. Because it's such a tight community of people, and you have to be able to bounce around different genres and stuff if you're still putting out material. It's amazing the amount of output they've had, given how little of it actually reaches out beyond their country.
Yeah, he was in one that was almost similar to this. I believe it was called The End of a Priest, where he takes over for a priest that was coming to town, and then hilarity ensues off of that.
I love her line, that's exactly how I imagine a pilot would look. It's sort of a meta joke in that, of course, he's not the pilot, but if the real pilot were there, he'd still look exactly the same.
Some pretty good effects here with this whole control room in the back. I don't know if that's actually rear projection or if it's just a big picture in the background.
Turn on the volume in my headphones slightly because I need to hear that music. It's got a very early 80s BBC Hitchhiker's Guide quality to it.
It's pretty good miniature work here.
I want every flight that I take to last 5 minutes and go to that music.
Now, the music is original and not stock music, correct? I believe?
Correct. Yeah, this was not one of the countries where they would just grab stock music or grab lyrics or music from other countries. This is not Turkey or Hong Kong.
No, and I appreciate that, because everything that I've looked at shows a lot of unique inventiveness, where they're not just kind of riding on the coattails of what's popular in the outside world, they're just stewing their own pot. That's a good model.
It's a really nice model, yeah.
I can't tell if he's sick or fed up.
Yeah, I don't know. If I was listening to Shirley all the time, I'd probably be fed up.
Yeah, you'd be rolling your eyes.
Especially when you're the one who has a gun. Just waiting. I do always love this whole thing of, but we wanted to see the dinosaurs. And that does bring up interesting questions of, if you can alter time, as happens in this movie, how is it that time travel has become so widespread and popular of a tourist thing?
I also like Shirley's question that we just passed. How is it that this even works? And the way her husband just sort of hand waves it away. I don't know. I'll just ask the company, because in the end it doesn't really matter. But yeah. If I were writing a time travel story, I probably wouldn't think to involve rockets. So it's an odd choice.
I mean that I would get obsessed with the implications of it, but I'm perfectly fine just being like, it's a delightful comedy.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite time travel stories is Jack Finney's Time and Again. Mm-hmm. And in that, basically the lead character goes into a hotel room and sort of thinks himself into the past, if I'm remembering correctly. It's the vaguest time travel setup that you could possibly imagine. It's a wonderful book, though, but how he gets into the past, in the end, doesn't really matter. He goes into the past.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of Somewhere in Time and how Christopher Reeve travels through time in that one. I just remember when he looks at the penny and it brings him back.
I still need to see that one.
That was kind of a staple here in Michigan since it was shot up on Mackinac Island, so people would just go gaga. Oh, hey, it was shot in Michigan. Let's watch it. Okay.
And wasn't that just kind of playing on the themes of nostalgia and longing for pastime? So much so that it literally pulls you there? I could see Matheson going with that angle.
That's basically Time and Again also, then. Why hasn't anyone filmed Time and Again? It's such a great novel. For what I read, that's been optioned like a dozen times, and no one is able to pull it off. I don't know why.
No, instead we get a TV reboot of Time After Time. To be fair, it wasn't bad.
Okay. I did not even want to see it because I like the original so much.
Oh, Meyer actually came back as a writer and producer on it. And then Kevin Williamson took over, which was an odd choice. But he did some interesting things, and then it got canceled after 5 episodes. So.
Is it one of those where you can see the other episodes someplace else?
Sadly, no. There's like 4 that never aired.
Yeah, at least with that Kolchak reboot, they put the other ones out on iTunes.
So we aren't missing out.
Well, you're not missing anything if you haven't seen it. So he does manage to get the date wrong when he comes back. So rather than having Hitler at the beginning of the war, we've got Hitler more towards the end of the war, I believe.
And is that because the pilot set the date wrong, or because they ineptly pushed the pilot out before he could set it correctly?
That's a good question.
Because if they made their own blunder, yeah.
I think the engineer takes the blame for it.
So when they introduced the idea of anti-aging pills, I thought for sure that would come into place somehow, and that we would have something to do with anti-aging. Like we would get Hitler in 1996 looking the exact same as he does here in 1944.
Maybe that's the unfilmed sequel.
So it's not that it reverses aging, though. I think it's just that it stalls it.
It arrests it, yeah.
Oh, sorry. He thinks it's 1944. I think it's actually 46.
No, it's 41.
Yeah, because they're 3 years early.
41. Okay. I'm sorry. You're right. I said that they came back too late, but they came back too early.
By the way, Jiri Sovak with the monocle. I love that. I love his Jack Benny glasses in I Killed Einstein. I just want to see all this guy's films. Perfect deadpan comedian.
Yeah, and I think I'm so used to him from I Killed Einstein that when I saw him without glasses, it was almost a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, when I was watching, because I'd watched this movie a few months ago, and I watched Einstein a few days ago, and I'm like, man, he looks familiar. Where have I seen him before? Then I watched this movie again, and I'm like, oh, he doesn't have glasses.
Yeah, they really changed his face.
Well, it's interesting that this is also 7 years after Einstein, whereas I almost would have put this one before that, because this one, it's partially the print is older and more faded. But there's such an opulence to Einstein with those gigantic sets and a more honed exploration of the concept that I almost would think that this was like draft 1 and that's draft 2 of the same idea. Not to knock this film. They just have very different approaches, yeah.
It didn't sound like you were. But I'm also curious where the state of Czechoslovakian film was at in 77 versus 70. I mean, they were having such a boom in the 60s, and then once the invasion happened in August 68, then that changed a lot of things for a lot of people, including the film industry.
I wonder what the budget was.
That's a really good question, because it looks great.
No, it looks really professional and polished, and everything that I've seen is really professional and polished. And it's that same quality where, a lot of countries they work on so much material on a regular basis that they just know how to hone it really well and how to get by on a dime really well. I mean, we see that with Hammer. We see that with a lot of Indian cinema, a lot of Japanese cinema, where they're not going to have the same levels of budget, but they can have a lot of inventiveness and just purely honed skill. And again, the people making this have been working in the industry for like 20 years by this point.
I mean, to go back to Carl Zeman again, I mean, he did pretty much every frame by hand. I mean, it is a handmade film, the Invention for Destruction.
I love the other invention that we've seen in here, this whole spray that knocks you out or freezes you.
God, when the one guy's leg falls off and the sounds that he makes.
Oh, God.
I like that everyone's still, like, conscious, even though their body's been frozen. They're like, I do love the effect of the camo net.
Well, this whole bunker set looks really good. And I do have to say, maybe Hitler doesn't look exactly like Hitler, but some of the other Nazis, they really captured them.
No, and let me make sure I get his name right. František Facena. Do we know anything more about him? Because he really does do a good Hitler.
He does do a great Hitler, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of those actors that just got to play Hitler all the time, you know?
His greatest hits album.
I have to wonder about Himmler's uniform, the sort of powder blue. Was that an actual uniform? I've not seen that before.
Yeah, in black and white photos, I would never know.
Well, I mean, he was the cousin Otho of the group. I just love how this sequence plays out. It's just wonderful, and just kind of drawing it out. Punchline, oh crap. Punchline, oh crap.
Uh-oh. Wrong ear.
Yeah, I like this, that we know it, but they don't know it.
And again, I would be curious to know, like, I mean, we talked about how little of the story is in here, if any of these elements come from other stories that Nesvedba did. Did he actually just work in developing the story for the screen and fleshing out new ideas? Because I know some of the films that he's credited on aren't just based on his works, he actually did co-write them. Well, granted, he's not credited as a co-writer on this one, but I would just be fascinated to know what was the development process, where did all the elements come from? Is this mostly just, hey, the director and his co-writer had the vague idea from Nesvedba and just ran with it? Because there is a lot of this that even though it wasn't in a Nesvedba story, I could see it being in a Nesvedba story.
Yeah, after having read like half a dozen of his stories, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, he's got a great way about telling his stories. I'm looking forward to reading more of his work.
It also, from what I've read, again, just a handful of stories, but it kind of reminded me of Stanislav Lem's work.
Yeah.
I think anyone who likes Lem would also like this man's stories.
Yeah, and if people want to track down more of his stories, I do think, again, Mike, I know you kind of trawled the archives for some of the magazine-published ones, but the anthology In the Footsteps of the Abominable Snowman is probably the easiest one to find. That was a 70s printing. You can usually find it for a few bucks through Amazon. He only had, I want to say, 40 stories total. About 20 of them were published in English, and none of them are in print anymore.
Yeah, I went and picked up a collection called, I think it was The Lost Face, and then I was looking at that versus Abominable Snowman, and it was pretty much the exact same stories, just in different order.
Well, and then there was an earlier one that was Vampires Limited, where it's basically the exact same anthology, just without the Vampires Limited story.
That actually might be his most popular work, the Vampires Limited story, because that got turned in. Well, yeah, and it got turned into Farrat Vampire, which Uri Hers did, which that seemed to actually break through from Czechoslovakia to the rest of the world. I've actually heard people talking about that, like, oh, have you ever heard about the vampire car? And it's like, okay, yeah, that is a thing, and that was a fantastic film.
Do you have a copy of that? Because I would love to see it.
I am pretty sure I've got a copy of that. I might even have it on DVD.
Because, yeah, that's one I tried tracking down, too. I only saw some clips. Again, like Death of Tarzan, I was only able to find some clips, and the clips were great. And the Death of the Ape Man was another wonderful story, where he's just literally redoing Tarzan the Ape Man, but in a very sarcastically real version of, yeah, if you took this psychologically messed up guy from the jungle, rich society is not going to suddenly accept him as the lost heir to an estate. He's just going to end up in a zoo.
I don't know my Nazis very well. Is this Himmler?
Himmler is in the powder blue.
Okamžik, můj vůdče. Povídám okamžik. Něco vám předvedu, můj vůdče. Dnes je 8. prosince, ano? 11 hodin 27 minut. Přesně za 3 minuty. Bude volat generál-major Henke z východní fronty.
By the way, I do love the added twist of his younger self also being on the base.
He looks pretty old here. He doesn't look like he would be just a regular old soldier at this age. But gets to be played by the same actor, and then you get some more great special effects work.
The CGI de-aging is exceptional.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they hop right out of that uncanny valley. It's not like The Irishman at all.
But seriously, it's a pretty good makeup job.
Well, and I know the actor would have been older at this point, too, so I'm curious, did they age him up here, or did they just de-age him in the other one, or kind of like do a little bit of both just to get a middle ground?
Yeah, add a little bit of gray to his hair, maybe shoot him without too much makeup here. Then he loses the monocle. 41. Right when Hitler thinks he's on top of the world.
Because he was born in 20, so he would have been 57 when they did this.
Looks damn good for 57.
Kept working up till 2000. Most of these actors actually did stick around and have really long careers and lived into their 70s and 80s. With the exception being Vladimir Mensik, who just passed away a few years after this.
Yeah, which was a huge loss. I always loved watching him and stuff. And he went all the way back to, and even before, Loves of a Blonde.
The leg.
Oh, God.
Imagine what that felt like.
I love how he shoves it under his coat. Wonderful.
Oh, I'd hate to be him when that wears off.
It'll pass soon. Don't worry.
I love just how thoroughly their plan falls apart in this sequence.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it wasn't until the second viewing that I for some reason, never picked up that it was an American tourist couple.
You are right. When she starts talking about back in Chicago, I'm like, okay, but yet all speaking Czech.
By the way, that's one of the best lines. Oh, Patrick, look, it's Hitler.
Put your arms around me. It's time for a photograph.
The only thing this movie is missing is the selfie stick from I Killed Einstein.
Hadn't been invented yet.
I'm waiting for a parody video of Hitler Hears About Time Travelers from America. Bruno Gans just going crazy.
Oh God, imagine Hitler time travels to present-day America and actually becomes politically successful. No, that would never happen.
I saw a reaction video the other day from Hitler where he heard about the beaches opening in Florida, and he was just going crazy. Definitely blackened his hair.
But yeah, the American husband, he doesn't really get to show it off much here. He gets some great dry lines, but seriously, as a pantomime artist in Pantau, he is just wonderful. And he's just as like this posh upper crust, basically butler type with a bowler hat and umbrella who just happens to be an alien going on adventures with children.
I'm trying to remember if it was Polak that made a lot of films about a clown as well. Yes, Clown Ferdinand. He made a bunch of films about Ferdinand. I think he even had a TV show.
I wonder what the first use of the mixed up suitcases.
That has to go back to the origins of film.
Originate? Yeah, I wonder if it's in silent film.
That's probably an old stage routine. It's probably like some ancient Greek play.
Right, about two suitcases.
He grabbed the wrong wine flask. It's like the bedroom farce. Who knows when it started? I do love this idea of let's just show Nazis them losing.
And scored to mournful music. It's part of the presentation because when Hitler turns it on again later, the score is still there.
Well, it's just a YouTube video that he found.
It's really better if you guys watch it from the beginning. Shouldn't be hiding under the table.
His reactions in this are great.
What are these magical flickering lights? It was interesting how the Czechs, who had been so under the boot of Hitler, how they would portray him in different films. I can only think of a handful where it wasn't more, just Nazis versus Hitler himself. There was one called I, Justice, where Hitler had survived the war, and these guys found him, and they were going to kill him in the most painful way possible, and they bring in this doctor who has experimented on all these things and knows this really painful way of killing him, and then it becomes this idea of, do you give Hitler mercy? So a little less funny than this film.
Even just going through Nesvadba's work, there's definitely the shadow of World War II that pops up a lot. A lot of buildings still in ruin, a lot of still the specters of the SS and everything. And you look at, he was born in 1926, so he grew up during all of that. And, but yeah, like we talked about, the last plan of the Third Reich, where it's this whole eugenics experiment to rapidly breed babies because we need an army. There was another one, the chemical invention of destiny or something like that, where it's a guy who works at an abortion clinic he was an old German scientist who was basically using women as a way to try to rebirth his own mother. And ends up making so many copies of his own mother that she no longer seemed unique and interesting anymore. That was one of his darker stories. That was a weird one.
Yeah, he could go dark very well.
This whole sequence is great. Someone needs to cut YouTube videos of Hitler reacting to various things with this sequence. The Cats trailer.
Like George C. Scott. Turn it off! Turn it off!
Oh, then you can get Hitler reacting to the George C. Scott video and George C. Scott reacting to the Hitler video.
Oh, and throw Nicolas Cage in there from 8mm too.
Oh god, I'm so glad I saw Hardcore recently.
That was a good way to lighten the mood.
Yeah. But no, seriously, that close-up on the eyes is so good. It's like it's comical, but it's also genuinely haunting and disturbing.
Even though they don't bring Hitler the atomic bomb, they bring him this. And I kept wondering, would this change the future? If you know you're destined to fail.
Yeah, and have to wonder, though, is his obstinate refusal to believe it. Would that have affected anything?
I love this bomb. Just the way that it looks here. So
the
great.
Devil's Machine. And if you think about it, how many nukes are in that lake by the end of this movie?
Yeah, I don't think that's the best way to dispose of that particular bomb.
Probably not.
The radiation is just going to seep out for the next 100 years. You're having yourself executed, you idiot. I love this idea.
And again, very nice. Look at this nice, clean line between them.
He somehow looks jowlier as his older self. I'm not sure how they managed to do that. Maybe it's lighting.
I wonder if they just tucked his collar more in the old one, or if he's like holding his head back a little more. Could be lighting too, yeah. And then I love he literally does get executed by himself.
Perhaps they did a Boyhood and they actually shot his younger scenes decades earlier.
This movie's been in production for 30 years.
Well, you see, they went back in time. I mean, they had the music for it. That's the key.
Is that going to be the first use of time travel?
Once you have that music, time travel is easy. And then I love just how much the green spray gets used here.
Basically, I love that it looks like a can of deodorant.
Gentleman's perfume. Nice simple stop motion effect. I love it.
You shit ass.
I hope they keep that translation. I'm really hoping for this new second run that they'll go through and clean up some of these subtitles a little bit at least.
Yeah, that's why I haven't really mentioned any of the lead brothers' names, because who knows what names they're going to end up with by the time we get to this release.
Well, they couldn't even keep him straight. There were a few times where they went from Charles to Carol and John to Jan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're saying Jan, just keep it Jan. It's
I know,
okay.
exactly. I mean, it's not exactly a weird name.
Yeah.
I love that these Nazis now have to hide from the Nazis.
It's just such a wonderful high-concept movie.
I mean, we are almost an hour in here, and we haven't even had the redo, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I know. They pack a lot into the second half of this movie. They give you the nice hour long to just get all of the setup out of the way, and this is even part of the setup. We're still getting set up right now. This isn't even the payoff. And then the last half hour is just going to be, okay, now we're going to wind back and pay everything off.
For a comedy, I mean a fairly goofy comedy, it really does the whole complications of time travel really well. It's very well thought out.
Like, I even love when he lands the ship, they're like, wait, you haven't even taken off yet.
I wonder how often that happens at the time travel airport.
Yeah, you'd think, like a flock of birds or something every now and then would knock things off course.
I mean, when they go visit the dinosaurs, does anyone step on a butterfly?
Are there ever two Ron Silvers at the same time?
Maybe every time they go back to the dinosaurs, they just, release a few butterflies just to be on the safe side.
That would be prudent.
Now, has everyone released their butterfly? We're good. And this is just a good, nice, simple action stunt work, and works really good, effective, exciting. I did love that one guy who rolled into the snow with his legs on fire. That was a nice effect. I'm curious how much of that rocket is actually there. If it's a cutout, if it's an actual full prop. Because I know when it takes off into the air, we're seeing it. Because that's large.
I mean, right there, it looks really darn good.
I do love the Nazi uniform over the spacesuit.
So they're leaving Patrick and Shirley back there.
I don't think anyone's going to miss them.
I mean, Shirley is such a big Hitler fan. She'll be fine.
As long as she gets her photos taken with him.
I hope she brought her autograph book.
Because, right here, I don't know if that's a miniature or if they're just, using a crane to lift the full location prop up.
Nicely done.
Because that doesn't look like a miniature. And then it also brings to mind I Killed Einstein when Yuri Sovak is flying on the electric guns.
I think we just reused some footage there, maybe?
Should have taken a Dramamine guy.
Yeah, how do you do a barf bag in that helmet?
I'm guessing, speaking of Einstein, I'm guessing it's some sort of Einsteinian principle that we have when it comes to traveling through space in order to change time so that you're going faster than the speed of light so that you can maneuver through forwards or backwards. But it doesn't seem like that long of a trip.
We see if you remove the Infinity Stones from the past, you have to make sure you return them from the point where you took them.
But how does he get him back to the Red Skull on that planet?
Well, he went to the planet. The big thing is, yeah, man, they were really missing that scene. I mean, I needed to see that reunion.
No. No, I don't think I will.
So yeah, we are at exactly an hour in when we finally get him coming back to the present. Or back to the future, as it were.
One might say.
Marty!
I'm glad that he was able to listen in on their conversation so he knows that they're not just friendlies now.
I hope the subtitle preserves that line where he's calling him a chicken X. I don't know what that means, but I want to believe it's just some future insult.
I still want to know what the on-dish. The on-dish car. I was trying to figure that one out the best that I could.
That is so authentically Egyptian.
It's not a Thanksgiving decoration or anything.
Oh, looks it's Brian Eno just went across the screen.
All right, now we can do everything over again.
Well, Mike, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this podcast.
They've got people everywhere. Even this guy who works for the airport is part of their major scheme.
Yeah, there's a lot of the Nazis that we see in the opening scene that we never see again. So it is a larger group. I love he steals his own car.
I like that he had to kick the tire and make the trunk pop up again to remind us about that.
And make a sound effect.
Yes. See, now he is smarter than these guys.
And I love he has a plan, but because they're evil, they can't actually allow him to just do the plan. Hey, he scalded himself with tea.
That's the name of the movie.
It is.
Wow, wow, wow.
I love that robe.
That's a pretty fantastic robe.
But yeah, I love how everyone reacts differently to the whole I get to redo the day again.
Right.
It's like, he's like, hey, I can save my brother and fix everything. And this other guy's like, hey, I can kill everyone. Including myself. It's like, there can't be two of me. Why? Wouldn't the world be a better place with two Vladimir Mesniks in it?
Oh, God, yes. He made so many films that you would think there were two of them.
And then I love it. It's like, yeah, we'll get this guy to fix it. Instantly hit by car.
I love this woman on the street with her dog, and that she's just the kind of one of the constants to the world.
No, yeah, there's like a lot of little things that if you don't pay attention, you're going to miss them repeating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a sweet dog.
I'm glad that the green spray wears off a little faster in this version than when they were in 1941.
It was a long drive. I'm just glad that when he pushes him down the hill, like all of his limbs don't snap off. He seems a lot more flexible.
When I visited Prague, I did not visit the city's garbage dump, so
No?
this makes up for that.
That would have been my first stop. You only know a people once you see their garbage.
Snap.
I think Benjamin Franklin said that.
I always make it a point to visit supermarkets, but I'll have to add garbage dumps to my itinerary.
Supermarkets are a lot of fun. Go in and see what they have.
I love seeing the different foods.
I bought so much Belgian chocolate for my wife when I went to Belgium, and then I found that it was all cooking chocolate.
I miss being in Japan and getting melon flavored everything.
Oh,
melon
God.
Candy, melon glazed bread.
They do love their
They
melon.
had this delicious melon soda, but in the time after I went was when they lifted their high fructose corn syrup restrictions. So now all the Japanese sodas just taste like high fructose corn syrup.
Well, you know, that's just the same thing as corn sugar, and everybody likes sugar. I like how the drapes match the bedspread.
Oh, nice touch.
Mm-hmm. Very classy hotel.
And that's just Mesnick.
This guy is so practical.
You'd think it would benefit your organization to now have more members.
Even if they are the same guy.
But again, if he's not one of the Nazis, maybe that makes sense why he has this kind of more outside cutthroat approach.
I mean, today he would be a CEO of a major conglomerate.
It's missing the line, well, I don't have to kill you because you already killed yourself.
There we go.
I do love that animation effect.
It's so simple, but so effective.
And they put a good sound over it, too.
How did I survive?
I have all my limbs.
I had a Bible. Oh, no.
Speaking of ancient tropes, there has to be like an ancient Greek play where someone gets shot with an arrow but they happen to be holding a stone tablet in their pocket.
That is the car where you don't want to put a dead body in the trunk.
At least get a decent tarp or something.
Were they out of the Drano fluid?
That's a good point.
Again,
maybe they didn't have time.
In a world where that can dissolve anything, the mob would already be using that all the time. And if that guy's a mobster, he would know to use the Drano. I love this guy as the truck driver.
He's got a great face. No nonsense. A smell.
I love the car phone.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And, you know, true to 1996, cell phones haven't fully caught on yet. They're still bleeding in.
But there are car phones.
And it still has a cord and a dial. Yeah, this would have been the era where before cell phones, you had the cordless phones all over the house with the giant antennas sticking out of them.
The Gordon Gekko phone.
Hell, I remember mid-90s, our basement phone was still rotary. We always kept the old ones as backups.
Okay, I'm so old. When I was a kid, we had a party line. With several of the neighbors.
I was just thinking about party lines. Yesterday, 2 days ago, there was what was I watching where they had to... Oh, it was an episode of The Twilight Zone 85, the adaptation of Grandma by Stephen King, and the kid was trying to get the woman off the party line.
It's such a bizarre concept in retrospect.
I know I'm younger than you two, but party lines were still around when I was younger.
You're talking about the 976 party lines.
Yeah. I think they were just dying. I never used one, but I remember my parents would occasionally.
What I mean is, my family and several of our neighbors, basically, if you could place a call by yourself, but if someone else on the line, one of your neighbors, was on the line, when you picked up, you would hear them talking, and you would have to wait for them to hang up before you could dial out or get any calls in.
Oh, I see what you mean, where everything was kind of still tied?
Yeah.
Okay.
With, I don't know, 2 or 3 neighbors? This was until the late 1960s. I grew up Eastern Long Island. It was fairly rural then.
Okay, then yeah, you guys are old.
You don't have to tell me. I know.
Yeah, I'm curious, too, if the subtitles will keep these things like Mrs. Number One and all of those things, where he does sound more like a crazy person when he's talking about these different women.
That's just a typo. I when you look at the IMDb listing for the characters' names, that woman is Mrs. Nalova, and her husband is Robert Noel, N-O-L. The L got turned into a 1 there.
It's probably just a typo error.
Was I misreading it, or did it actually say that?
No, it actually had a 1, but it should have been an
There
L.
were a couple instances where the capital I has been replaced by 1 too. That's just a coding error.
Darn this SRT file.
Sorry, I just checked. The last party line shut down in Nevada in 2001. And technically there are still party lines that exist, but only 1 person is left on them. So they just didn't shut down the number.
Sounds like my kind of party.
Yeah. This has been another installment of Noel Learns About the Past.
Oh, he's very practical. How can 2 of us live on 1 salary?
Hey.
He doesn't think that the other guy can make it a salary as well.
Oh man, imagine how great of a mob enforcer you could be if you could go full prestige on people. You can get both ahead of and behind the person you're taking out.
I like now how we have a way to tell him apart from the other one, that he's got the black eye.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clever.
He's pretty stoic, actually, considering that his brother choked to death on a roll. Whenever he says, hey, my brother just died, suffocating on a roll, he says it pretty... It's pretty flat.
Well, he just had to roll with it.
Yeah. Oh, boy. I mean, he was fed up with his brother. He wasn't paying the rent. He knew he was screwing up at work.
Well, again, it's like he just got thrown into this whole identity thing and has just been kind of dragged along for the last day.
True. I should give him a break. I love it's the second time that he's almost hit by the knife thrower.
I absolutely love this scene that's coming up. It is so good.
And I love this twist of he still thinks he saved his own brother.
So he probably thinks that's Karl coming up rather than Jan.
So, I think that explains 7 must be a lucky number.
She seems to think he's cheap.
Yeah.
Maybe not in this scene, but with the first time he says it, she basically seems to suggest, oh, come on, buy a dozen. JK, just kidding.
Now things are getting so complicated. I love it.
I have to say, my second watch of this, everything became a lot more clear. The first go, I was a little bit confused, but everything is there. It's all very logical.
Oh, you're just dropped in the middle of it, yeah. I love how quickly they get the chairs together. But yeah, no, it's definitely one of those ones where it's like, yeah, the first time you're watching it, you're just taking it all in. It's one of those great heist or time travel. It's a good puzzle movie where it's like the first time you're just taking in all the pieces, and then the second time when you can really go back and look at all the setup properly.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it a lot more on the second viewing.
Víš, kdo byl Karel? No tohle? Gauner fašoun. Chtěl obrátit dějiny, ohrozit celý svět. Rozumíš? Tak ty žiješ, Karele. Ale já nejsem Karel, já jsem ty. Ty jsi mi dal.
Hey, that's your brother you're talking about.
But I love that past him doesn't realize, is still refusing to accept that this is not his brother.
I saw you die this morning. How can you be here?
Nikdy se ho nevzdám. To byste na mě šili boudu. Všechno vysvětlím. Není třeba, pojď sem. Karle, miláčku, ublížil jsi. Co se to děje? Ale domluvili se na nás.
Chekhov's trampoline.
And I love how we go from this kind of funny, sweet moment to, oh.
Neither of us are dead. But don't worry, we'll change that. The entire family dies.
Yeah. This is why you don't let Thor near the trampoline. And he doesn't really seem to have that strong of a reaction to the entire family being wiped out.
No.
You've made us into orphans.
We have a premiere next week.
Well, you kind of played a role in that, buddy. Let's not shift all the blame.
I love how mildly inconvenienced blonde guy is. He's just, damn. It could have been worse.
Even the flower lady's dead. Don't worry, they'll be as fit as a fiddle tomorrow.
That needs to be a Pixar short of a fiddle goes to a gym.
pay attention. We are now standing on the Charles Bridge, decorated with many statues. It's a stone.
Yeah, this is a very easy way to kill this guy. Seems like it would be more of a inconvenience than a murder.
Yeah, they're not that. It's not like a suspension bridge. They're not that high up. Like if he clipped his head on a boat on the way down, I'd understand.
Good dummy work.
And it's the only time the women that he obsessed over noticed him. It is so thematically poignant.
I am impressed at how much we are telling in such a short amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
And the way everything is given visually rather than in dialogue, it's very well done.
Well, again, they took so much time setting everything up that right now you can just very quickly reference without having to like do the thing of like do a flashback to remind everyone.
Right. It's really well written and edited.
And again, that definitely adds to replay value too. Like if you don't pick up on everything, when you go back and watch it again, it's going to be, oh, hey.
Right. Did you see that? I saw that. Did you see that guy in the background? That's the same person.
It's not like the typical trope of, hey, we have to explain what happened. They just run with it.
Right. Now he gets to act like Carl and be such a dick to everybody.
I want to see a whole TV series of the mobster and the Nazi. Just as like roommates while fighting crime and supporting fascism.
The White family won't be able to go.
Aww. They wanted to see the dinosaurs that they were never going to see.
Save their lives.
The guy who plays the husband there, every time I see him on screen, he reminds me of one of Bob Newhart's patients in the original Bob Newhart show. I can't think of the name of that actor.
He kind of looks like somewhere between Jack Lemmon and Buck Henry.
I think the actor I'm thinking of, his last name was Riley, or was the character Riley?
Charles Nelson Riley?
No, like Jack Riley?
Yes, it was Jack Riley. He was Mr. Carlin.
Mr. Carlin, thank you. Similar face.
It's funny, I only remember the two patients of Mr. Peterson and Mr. Carlin. I'm sure that there were a lot of others, but those were the ones I remember the most.
Oh, the older lady who always brought her knitting. I liked her.
We definitely need more Tom Poston in the world.
No, ale to je skandál. No. A nemáte chuť se podívat na stavbu pyramid? Nebo na bitvu u Waterloo?
Cenový rozdíl samozřejmě vyrovnáme.
Just try to, sell them on a different package. Watergate, you mean?
What would be fun to actually go back and see in Watergate? Someone stumbling around a dark room?
Yeah, I guess that'd probably be it. Maybe go to the trial.
I mean, to go back and visit Dick, that would be a fun movie to visit the time of, but not the actual Watergate.
You talking about the movie Dick?
Love that movie.
He's so much more confident in this version. I'm very surprised that they actually went with English for the bomb, since everything else is in Czech. Even the Americans are speaking Czech.
Yeah, even though it's Americans in South America.
Right.
But again, it's one of those film things you just kind of run with like sound in space.
I think there was at least a little German spoken by the Nazis in the Hitler sequence? I'm not entirely sure, though.
No, you're right. And even the parrot speaks German at the very beginning.
Well, 2 words anyway. Oh, no, he actually has the other phrase, doesn't he? Something about honor.
Send these guys out to dispatch them.
I love this twist.
Yes. An infernal machine.
The devil's machine.
Mohu vám být v něčem nápomocen, Sturmbannführere? Kolikátého je dnes, admirále? Moment!
But that is the same person they stop on the first go-around, correct? So that would suggest they're still in 1941.
Correct.
Oddly enough, I believe he's also one of the actors in the opening. With all the old Nazis, too.
Get rid of that infernal machine. Back into the lake.
Alongside the last one.
Exactly where it belongs.
This is how Godzilla happens.
A few decades later, it's the worst super fun to sight in the world.
It would just be like a giant disappointing German kaiju just kind of walls out of the lake, eats everyone's sausages.
Reptilicus. Oh wait, no, that was Denmark.
The German kaiju would be called Sturmdrang. You can ply him with beer. But then they start running out of their supply of beer, so do we let the monster run loose or do we drink?
So that whole trip took just 25 minutes, so we're cutting down by half each time.
Yeah, I love this entire third time loop. Like, he just did that entire time loop in, like, the span of 5 minutes. This is such efficient plotting. And yet it doesn't feel rushed. It still feels, like, leisurely.
It feels tense. I mean, but you're right. It's very
It's
efficient.
not, like, super high energy, and it's not overly drawn out. It's just got that perfect middle ground of it's moving, but it's still moving at a good pace.
There we go.
I killed everyone, and now I'm getting them arrested. This is literally a have a cake and eat it too movie.
Yeah, because there are the 2 female leads in here, and he gets to be with both of them. One brother with one and one brother with the other. Or one version of him with one and one version with the other.
He gets to have a brother again without having a crappy brother. He gets to get people arrested without killing them while also killing them.
Yeah, this is really smart. To see Donald again, the dog. We finally get the fantastic use of the dish detergent.
Yes.
Or dish dissolver, I should say.
Let's do a middle ground. It's a de-agent.
Very smart. The way that he was the body double in the other one, and then now it's the one putting him down in the tub as the body double.
And then I love that he just accidentally dissolves him too.
Doesn't even think about it. Doesn't do it on purpose.
I was really worried about that foot that's outside the tub. I thought we were going to see a foot hanging there by itself after the rest of the body dissolved.
Well, as long as the central torso dissolves first, it'll gradually the weight of the leg.
Sounds like you've done this before.
A voice of experience, Noel.
Well,
He's a big fan of Vincent the Cleaner. Again, look at that. That beautiful split screen effect there. It's so nice.
See, there's that foot. It's still there.
It would be funny if the foot was still left behind. Oh, and in order to hide it, he just throws it across the room for the dog to use as a shoe toy.
All our problems are solved. Good thing that doesn't dissolve the sink or tub.
Now, there is something at the bottom of the tub, and I can't figure out what it is.
It's the bottle.
Something doesn't get dissolved.
It's the bottle.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, thank you.
I guess if the bottle dissolved, that would
It'd be hard to market.
Pretty bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was an Encyclopedia Brown mystery that involved a villain claiming to have an acid that would dissolve anything. And Encyclopedia Brown figures it out because, of course, the bottle doesn't dissolve.
Encyclopedia Brown versus the cleaner who gets rid of the bodies.
He should be fighting the Nazis.
There we go. We got one too many watches.
If only watches were an easy thing to sell if you had an extra one.
This version of 1996 had no eBay. Because I know that wouldn't be invented for a few years yet.
I believe pawn shops were around by then.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Oh, she looks fine. Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's like I honestly thought when I started the movie that she would be a love interest of some sort. Because there's this odd focus on her.
Yeah, I kept thinking that Carol had sex with her since he's such a dog.
But I also thought she would be the sweet love interest for I love that shot.
Nice.
But I also thought that she'd be like the sweet love interest for the good brother.
But no, we've got the sweet love interest as the flight attendant.
Oh, there we are. Everybody's in the van.
You don't know how right you are, sister. There we go. I thought they were going to do that match action shot with the watch, but we got to do it with the flowers.
And then we need an epilogue of like an elderly Jiri Sovak hijacking the van with his younger self.
Coming out of the shadows. The one-legged colonel coming out and taking it over. Gentlemen, this was a lot of fun.
Yes, this is a delightful movie.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take a break and play an interview with Jonathan Owen, who has written about Tomorrow I'll Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea's strange history in the UK.
How to continue a television series after a major actor has left the cast.
Part 3, The Doctor Who Method.
Give the character the ability to completely alter his appearance, and thus be played by any available actor.
This also lets the character evolve into suitable form for any given audience.
For more about British science fiction television, listen to the British Invaders podcast.
www.britishinvaders.com.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, AdamandEve.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to AdamandEve.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out AdamandEve.com today, select one item, and get 10 free gifts including free shipping when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at adamandeve.com.
Hi there, faithful Projection Booth listener, Chris Stashew here. If you're looking for even more deep dive film discussion, both old and new, on and off the cinematic beaten path, check out the Culture Cast. Every episode I'm joined by a different guest as we traverse the cinema landscape talking about not only our monthly theme, but also some of the year's biggest films. I'm even joined by the host of the Projection Booth, the one and only Mike White. So if you want to listen to even more conversations on film, head on over to culturecast.com or find it on all podcatchers, both Android and iOS.
Jonathan Owen, frequent guest of the Projection Booth. Now you're back under the hot seat as an interview subject. Tell me about this article you're writing about Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea.
My article, it's still in very early stages, so yeah, I probably will not be able to quite dazzle you as much with my expertise as I was hoping, but this is something the coronavirus did affect, actually, because I was hoping to get some materials from the National Film Archive and to be in contact with them about reviews and things like that from the time, from their library. But I think things have slowed down somewhat, really. So I guess I have enough of the background to sort of talk about the background of in terms of the film industry and the genre of filmmaking that this comes from. And I've been doing quite a bit of research into the UK reception and the UK showing of the film in the 80s. And that was really one of the things that I was wanting to look at, I think, in the article that I'm going to write. So this is going to be like a contribution to an edited book about cult cinema in a sort of global perspective. So I guess cult cinema often makes people think about, American cinema, British cinema, and I wanted to contribute to this book because I think it's going to be quite interesting to look at, like, cult cinema from other parts of the world. And I'm still sort of deciding, like, how far the parameters are going to go for this. I'm certainly going to look at the British reception, and I'm probably going to look at the Czech reception as well of the film, and maybe to compare and contrast how the film was seen and how it's remembered, like in both contexts. So I think probably the kind of origin story of the article will be this now sort of mythical British screening of the film in the early 80s. So what happened was that in the early 80s, there was a foreign language film slot on BBC Two. I think this ran from about 1976 until 1986, and this was called Film International, and it was a slot for showing basically quite contemporary, so quite recent foreign language art films. So I believe it was I found the date actually when it was shown. I think it was the 16th of January, 1982. So BBC Two showed this film at about 9 o'clock at night. Since then, it's developed a kind of, a genuine, albeit small, sort of cult following amongst British viewers who saw the film at the time and then, I guess in many cases, could not really remember the title or had only like a vague memory of it, or maybe thought, even dreamt it or imagined it, and became quite fascinated by it. And I guess between 1982 and I guess the early 2000s, I mean, it would have been pretty much impossible to track it down. So it did develop this kind of slightly mythical status among this small group of British cinephiles. In fact, this was actually how I first heard of the film, because it was around the time that I started researching Czech cinema. I had a friend who had heard about the film from another friend, and all the other friend could remember of the title was this just very vague approximation of the title. And I think the first time I heard about it, it was described to me as being called something like Tomorrow I Will Get Up and Drink Some Tea I think it was just, that was all that I think this guy could remember of the title. And because I was already researching Czech cinema at the time, I was able to find it quite quickly. And at this point, there was this series of DVDs coming out from the so-called Golden Fund of Czech cinema, which were fairly easy to order online. So I think I don't think there was a big gap between hearing about it and then being able to find a copy. In a kind of very roundabout way was how I first heard about it. And I'd probably seen a couple of the other films of this kind already. I mean, I think I'd already seen Who Wants to Kill Jesse. That probably was the film that was kind of like the more revelatory one, because I think that gave me my first taste of this kind of Czech crazy comedy subgenre. So I think to some extent the kind of shock of the encounter with this kind of filmmaking was minimized a little bit, because Jesse is so impressive and that's such a striking and such a strange film. But nonetheless, I mean, Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea, I mean, it is about giving a hydrogen bomb to Hitler and trying to change history and have the Nazis win the Second World War. So I think, by any standard, this is a pretty striking and strange movie. So I think I'm going to look at that British cult. I'm hoping to try and interview a few people who maybe saw the film on its original transmission. And I'll probably look also at the Czech reception too. And I get the feeling that I think for a lot of Czech viewers, I think this kind of comedy has a lot of sort of nostalgic associations. And I think there is a similar kind of cult reception in the Czech context too, although perhaps in a different way. I think, firstly, I think these films, for obvious reasons, are better known in the Czech context. So I think the cult, if we can call it that, is bigger. But I think there is a similar level of fascination and affection for some of these films. And I guess what interests me is perhaps whether younger Czech viewers are interested in these films. And I'm thinking that maybe for a young Czech viewer, maybe these films now look as strange as perhaps they did to a British viewer in 1982. I'm wondering whether we could sort of tie this into this idea of nostalgia, this sort of, in a way, this weird kind of perverse nostalgia for the communist period. Because I think in a weird way, these films do very much belong to the time that they were made in. I think they are, in a good way, I think, artifacts of the 1960s and 70s. And so, yeah, I guess I'm interested in those different kinds of cult response that the film produced.
What have you been able to dig up as far as the actual production of this film? I'm particularly interested in the director, Jan Polak. Was he more of a new wave filmmaker? But it seemed like there was a big gap in his filmography, so I keep wondering if he got in trouble at some point, because it seemed like right around 68 he ducked out.
I think he was working in television. So I kind of get the impression, and I mean, this is just, I guess, in terms of my preliminary research, I get the impression that he had a fairly smooth ride. I think I don't get the sense that he was ever considered a sort of a troublesome or a subversive figure. I mean, I think. And I think this is true perhaps in general with a lot of the directors of these comedy films. I think that in contrast to the new wave figures, they had a fairly easy passage. So I guess in many ways the turning point in Czech cinema comes after 1968 and actually sort of really takes effect around 1970. So 1970 is really when you see like this big reorganization of the film industry at Barrandov, where basically there is a kind of, I'm not sure whether to use the word purge, because purge implies violence, and it wasn't really violent, but there was a big changeover where you had a lot of figures who had represented the new wave or who had represented the more liberal climate of the 60s, where a lot of those figures were basically lost their jobs, lost their positions, in some cases, of course, emigrated. And basically a lot of people were no longer working as filmmakers after around 1970. And so you had other figures who were able to keep on working. So, I mean, Karel Kakinya I think is one example, and people like Olgi Glipsky, Václav Vorlicek, I mean, they had a relatively smooth transition. I don't think they really got into trouble with the authorities. And of course, Otakar Vavra, who was, I guess, like the ultimate survivor, who was able to kind of work in every single political regime and political climate that there was. For me, I would align Polak more with those kind of filmmakers who were, I guess, would not really have considered themselves as like auteur filmmakers. I guess they were more what we might call, and I don't want this to sound like derogatory, but more like craftsman type filmmakers who could work in various different genres and were not so concerned about stamping a kind of personal style in the way that, say, somebody like Pavel Juráček or Jan Němec would be. I mean, from what I can see, it seems that Polak did have, I think, a predilection for certain kinds of stories and certain kinds of genres. So I find that I think he made quite a few sci-fi films. He made a few of the crime films, so the kind of Krimi type film that was also coming out of Germany in the 60s. And interestingly, I think probably the bulk of his output was films or TV shows for children. So, and this is perhaps surprising for international viewers, because I guess internationally, the films that he's best known for are, I guess, this film and also Icaria XB1, which is very much a sophisticated and quite adult sci-fi film. And for me, what's interesting is that basically right after he made Icaria XB1, he made a film called Clown Ferdinand and the Rocket, which is a children's sci-fi film which actually used the same sets as Icaria XB1. So for me, that tells us a lot, I think, about his versatility, about the way he could sort of move between quite a serious film like Icaria and then make a film like this for children about a clown. Although that does have a kind of a political resonance too, because it's about the world or the city in which the clown lives having to be vacated because this rocket is heading to Earth. And so there is a kind of Cold War undertow to that. But nonetheless, it is still kind of like a funny, cheerful sort of family or children's film about a clown. So, yeah, I think he really thrived for some reason, I think, in this genre of children's filmmaking. And I think what he's best known for, like in Europe, so I guess in other European countries, is this series of TV shows and films about this character called Mr. Tao, who is this sort of magical bowler-hatted character who can sort of change size and who gets into all kinds of like mischievous adventures. And so that, I think, is probably another little wrinkle that I might add to my research, because I think that in other European countries, he has a sort of much more mainstream profile, because I think the Mr. Tao shows, I think they were shown in both East and West Germany. They were shown in Scandinavia. Some of these shows and films were quite widely seen, I think. So I think where he has more of a sort of a cult or more of a minority interest in, say, in the US or in the UK, these are much more part of the, or at least were more part of the mainstream in Europe, in continental Europe.
It doesn't seem like something like Riders in the Sky would be that funny versus something like Clown Ferdinand.
Yeah, that's a good point. I often forget that he made that, actually, because, yeah, as you say, that's another complete departure, because, yeah, that's, as I remember, is about Czech pilots who are based in Britain. And, yeah, that's much more of a sort of straightforward kind of like action drama film, obviously with that historical setting. So, yeah, quite different really from his other works. I would say actually the closest work that he made to Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea is a TV series that he made in the early 80s called Visitors. As far as I know, I don't think this has ever been released with English subtitles. I think probably the best Next thing might be maybe German. There might be a German version around, and I believe this was a co-production with a number of other European countries, and that is like a sci-fi TV series, quite a strange series, because I guess nominally it seems to be aimed at a young audience, and yet it has quite adult elements in it. There is kind of like there are sort of risque moments in it and things like that. So it's not entirely clear really who it's aimed at. And that is also about time travel. So again, it's set in this world way into the future where there is total peace. And as I remember, it's about this trip back into the past to retrieve a scientific formula that will hopefully avert like an impending catastrophe in the future. So it's not entirely dissimilar kind of story, and it also has a lot of sort of bizarre effects and props in it. And I think the way I first heard of it was through Jan Schwankmeyer, because Jan Schwankmeyer designed some of the bizarre sort of inventions. So I think there are these weird kind of like food products that the characters have, where you have like, I think basically like a cube, like a little colored cube that will miraculously turn itself into like a full meal. And so, I mean, the effects are quite similar to some of the sort of bizarre sort of disappearing effects that you see in Tomorrow I Will Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea. So, yeah, I would say if you're hungry for something similar to this, I would say that's probably the closest that he came to this film. I think that's a good point, really, to bring in the writers, because I feel that this subgenre of filmmaking, the so-called crazy comedy, I think it is very much a writer's genre, really. I think that, and I think from what I can find from the historical materials, I think this is how the films were seen at the time. So I think if you take, say, some of the films that Oldřich Lipský made with Jiří Badečka, it seems to be that Badečka was really treated as the sort of auteur behind films like Lemonade Joe or Dinner for Adela. And I think a similar case can be made here, that I think Macourek is perhaps the real, not to discredit Polak, because I think Polak did actually co-write the script, but I think Macourek is very much the sort of imaginative presence here. And the film was based on a story by a writer called Josef Nesvadba. And Nesvadba, too, I think is a very interesting figure, perhaps comparable to some extent to Stanisław Lem in Poland. He was quite a major science fiction writer, and I have been able to find that some of his work was translated, actually. So I think if anybody's interested in these kinds of stories, there is a translated collection called In the Footprints of the Abominable Snowman, which I think you can find quite cheaply as a second-hand copy. And yeah, he was quite a major Czech sci-fi writer, and tended to deal with the kind of bizarre, often sort of philosophically tinged sci-fi conceits that you see here. And he actually wrote stories that inspired quite a lot of these films. I think You're a Widow, Sir, and I Killed Einstein, Gentlemen were also based on his stories. And so is the, I don't know if you know the Uri Hertz horror comedy, The Ferret Vampire. That was also based on one of his stories. And from what I can see, the story that inspired this is a story called Journey in the Opposite Direction. And this is a strange problem that I have, because I think I do remember reading this story, and based on my memory, I think it was very different from the resulting film. And from what I could find, I think Macourek basically added a lot of the story that we see in the finished film. So I think a lot of the stuff about the trio of Nazis, and I think the whole Hitler scenario about giving him a hydrogen bomb, I think came from Macourek. And from what I've read, I think Nesvadba had some kind of argument with Macourek during the writing, but then when he saw the finished film, I think he was quite happy with it, and I think he felt that, well, Macourek knew what he was doing. And so I think there was some kind of conflict, amicable perhaps, but yeah, I think there was some sort of disagreement about some of the story elements. So as I say, I think that shows, I think, the extent to which Macourek is really the kind of key imagination at work here. And I guess, yeah, as you said, I mean, so many of these films were written by him, and I think he really brought that kind of wild, imaginative quality. It's very much of a piece, I think, with a lot of these other films.
Yeah, I saw a lot of similarities between this one and another one that was based on the same writer's story, along with Macourek writing it, was I Killed Einstein, Gentlemen.
Yes. I think those two are quite closely comparable, aren't they? Because I guess both of them deal with time travel, and I think a lot of these films do tend to be set in a sort of a slightly sealed off world of their own. But I think in these cases, you do have this sense of like real history intruding. And I think that makes it all the more bizarre, doesn't it? That you're actually involving real events. And to me, I think this film is the ultimate example of that, because you are taking, the most serious, the most horrific thing, and you are integrating it into this very, very farcical story. And one of the things that surprised me watching it again was how kind of casually that is introduced. And I think it's interesting that it's not actually as big a part of the story as I remembered it as being. I remembered there being a lot more scenes with Hitler, for instance, and a lot more time devoted to that strand of the film. But actually, I mean, by the second half, a lot of it is about the Jan Bures character, and then his activities when he comes back from the time travel and his attempt to rectify various things. And so a lot of the film is actually given over to these kind of farcical elements. And I was surprised, how little, relatively speaking, how little time is given to the Hitler stuff. And it's almost as though there's a sort of offhandedness about it. There's a sort of casualness about it, which I think makes it all the more shocking somehow, all the more sort of strange.
And you can't do better than those three guys that are playing the Nazis. I mean, I love Vladimir Mesnik especially.
There probably are a couple of Czech comedies that he's not in, but I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could name them, because he's just everywhere. Yeah, and I mean, all the better, really. His work schedule must have just been insane, really, because he's everywhere, isn't he? Really. And likewise, I mean, to a lesser extent, Jerzy Sovak, who plays I guess he's kind of like the head Nazi, isn't he? I think his name is Abad, the guy in the white suit. And at the beginning, I mean, to me, it reminds me very much of the way Gregory Peck is dressed in The Boys from Brazil. I don't know if that was a deliberate reference. I mean, I'm not sure if that film would have been shown in Czechoslovakia at the time, but if it is a reference, it's kind of a funny one, I think. And he's quite a different character, isn't he? Because I think often he's this more sort of everyman, slightly nebbishy character, for instance, as he is in Jesse. But here, I mean, he does the sort of sinister Nazi thing quite well here. I mean, he is quite a sort of formidable figure here.
And I was surprised at how good the special effects were, having him work against himself and Petr Kostka work against himself. I was astounded, like looking at, other movies where you have people playing twins and just how lousy they can be. But here they actually worked.
Yeah, technically, I think it is really impressive still. I mean, I think a lot of the gadgets and things as well are really good, and the space travel scenes. And I mean, I saw on the Czech DVD I have, there is an interview with Theodor Pišček, who did the props and some of the effects, and he talks about the precision that they went into when they were designing the hydrogen bomb, and also some of the costumes. And apparently, I think they went to like military museums and things. And so I think when they were sort of designing the look of the film, I mean, they were pretty rigorous, I think. And I did learn that the spaceship, when it lands, I mean, is basically like a matte painting. And then I think what they did is they just built the base, because you do see them sort of coming in and out of the ship, but you only ever see that base in close-up. So the rest of it, when you see it like in long shot, is just a matte painting. So yeah, there are a lot of these little nice cheats like that, which I think pretty seamless. I think I wouldn't have noticed without knowing that.
So is your angle more, this is what Czech comedies were like, or this one stood out just because it was shown on the BBC and so many people remembered it in this kind of weird, not necessarily Mandela effect kind of way, but just that because I seem to remember other Czech films would show occasionally on the BBC. Like I remember Dinner for Adele seems to have also shown there, because a lot of people are saying like, oh, I remember this movie.
I think I am interested in the singularity, I think, of the particular film. I think the fact that this film was the one that got shown, I mean, I think it is a sort of a fascinatingly odd choice, really. And I find it quite interesting that it was shown in quite a prestigious art cinema slot, when I guess in Czechoslovakia, I mean, this would be much more of a popular comedy. And I think this is another point of contrast, because from what I've heard about the critical view of some of these films in the Czech context, it seems that they're not, or at least until recently, were not really very highly respected. And there is even a critical text about them by Petra Hanáková. And I mean, she does not endorse this view, but she basically says that these were films that critics for a long time in the Czech Republic were ashamed of. And so I think there is a certain sense of critical condescension, I think, to some of these films, and a sense that they were, in a way, these are tainted somehow by complicity with the communist era, because they were made in the normalization era, the 1970s. I mean, during really the bleakest years for Czech cinema and for Czech artists, and so that somehow they carry that taint of the kind of conformist mainstream of the 70s, and I guess in that sense are treated as a kind of politically tainted kitsch. Showing this film on a sort of like art cinema slot on BBC Two indicates a slightly different attitude, I think. And so, yeah, I think I'm interested in the fact that that film was the one that got chosen. And I think by extension, I am just personally very interested, I think, in the programming policies that I think we used to see in the UK. I mean, I think for me, that has very much a personal significance. And for me, I think this is one case in point, really. I think it's one thing to show like a Bergman film or a Fassbinder film, but to show a film like this, I mean, does indicate a really sort of either a very adventurous spirit or just a kind of completely random, let's just throw anything together kind of spirit. And I think in both cases, I mean, I have my own sense of nostalgia for that era, really. I mean, I would have been too young to have seen this at the time, but I kind of remember the sort of tail end of this kind of programming in the UK. I mean, I don't know how that compares with the US, whether the US was doing similar things at the time, whether they were showing films like this. I think the thing that's really strange about the UK was that, I mean, in 1982, there were still only 3 channels. We got a 4th channel in the same year, but, you know, there was this very restricted amount of programming because, I mean, you know, your audience was really just split 3 ways. And so I think just the chances of coming across something that would just be totally unlike anything you'd seen were a lot greater. And to me, I think just the randomness, just the sense of just the possibility of this kind of encounter is something that's really interesting to me. Yeah, I miss it. I think, I do feel a great sort of nostalgia for the fact that, I mean, we did used to show things like Schrankmeyer movies. We used to show, you know, Czech animation, if not exactly in prime time, but at a time when, you know, there could have been some people who were still awake and who could still catch these things.
That's something that has just been lost over the years, was the importance of what a TV broadcast could be, and just that it was such a singular experience for so many people. You know, we think back to like the finales of shows that would happen in the 80s or early 90s where so many people would tune in, because it was before, you know, probably by the 90s we had cable pretty ubiquitous, but when it came to the 80s and people tuning in to see who Who Shot JR, those kind of things, and having a movie show in a primetime spot like that could make such a difference and could affect so many people all at once. I know that being a fan of some British TV, like I hear about things like Ghost Watch and just what a huge effect that had, or some of the other Halloween programming.
Luckily, I was just old enough to catch that, and at the same time young enough to have been taken in by it. So yeah, I was one of those gullible people who thought that was real. Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we call those water cooler moments. I mean, those have gone, haven't they, to some extent, at least from our experience of television. And I mean, in a way, I sometimes worry that I'm being too churlish when I kind of have this, when I evoke this sense of regret and this sense of nostalgia for past experiences of watching these things on television, because, I mean, we have infinitely more choice now, but I think we don't have that possibility so much that you can just be into one kind of film, or you can be into, just sort of, mainstream cinema, and then you can encounter something that is completely out there and it can have this big impact on you, because certainly I remember things that I probably wouldn't have come across if I had been deliberately searching for them. And so, I think a lot of people of my age and older than me, I think we owe a lot to some of those formative TV experiences. If we're thinking about like the politics of the film, there is this view that critics probably do not have as much now, but I think at one time took towards these films that they were somehow sort of politically complicit. And I was thinking, is there anything in this film that could confirm that kind of attitude towards them? And I mean, for me, this is fairly apolitical. I don't really get any kind of like subtext. There's that word again, or any kind of undertow of either sort of conformist or subversive politics. I think if we were to find anything political, it's maybe in the fact that I think early on there is a reference to socialist nations having a conference and basically talking about peace. And so there are just a few very minor, I think, political touches. And I think the fact that the bomb has been stolen from the Washington Military Museum could indicate possibly a certain sort of stance towards America, where America is being, I guess, implicitly tied to warmongering. And I guess if we're going to take it a bit further to the Nazis, I don't think we could go too far with that. We could say that Jan Bures, the brother who is the protagonist, we could say he's kind of like a model, upstanding citizen. He always tries to do the right thing by everybody. And the brother is much more of a promiscuous, much more sort of roguish figure who ultimately, I guess, is I don't think he's a fascist himself, but he's sort of collaborating with fascists. And maybe there is something in that alignment between that sort of personal amorality and this kind of fascist complicity that we could say ties in with a sort of a communist or a state communist idea about, Western decadence. But I think I'm maybe overreaching with those kinds of ideas. So I would say there isn't really anything that strikes me as particularly political here. I think for me, it's more about farce, more about, I guess, exploring ideas about time travel. One thing that really struck me watching it again, though, was I think just the representation of time travel, and I think the way that kind of anticipates postmodernism. I think this idea that time travel has become this kind of form of amusement and this form of tourist spectatorship. I mean, I think that is quite interesting. And I think what's striking is the way that contrasts with the scene where we see the Hitler character in his bunker watching that incredible series of documentary scenes about the way that the war ends. And I think there is that nice contrast between this kind of kitschy idea of history as just something that you go and watch as a spectator, and then the real poignance of those documentary scenes. So I think there is a nice kind of contrast there. So yeah, that was one of the things that I took from it watching it again.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
No problem. No, it made my week.
So, Jim, what is keeping you busy, sir?
Keeping on, Mike. If, however, anyone is interested, I am other Jim Donahue on Twitter.
Not the Jim Donahue?
No, that was already taken.
That makes sense.
Are you related to Phil Donahue?
No, although I did spot him once on the streets of New York City.
And how about you, Noel?
Still just doing my regular shows, Schumacast, getting the Batman movies edited, finally out there. And Grey Stoked, where we just wrapped up the 40s with Lex Barker taking over the mantle from Johnny Weissmuller. And you can find those all at noelct.blogspot.com.
Well, thank you again, guys, for being on the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please head on over to the website, projectionboothpodcast.com, where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll also find a link over to Patreon, where you can make a donation to the show. Every donation we get helps the Projection Booth take over the world.
vstanu a opařím se čajem, tak jako v tom filmu, měl bych jistý zájem, vrátil bych se časem, napravil bych chyby, musím říct, ta myšlenka se mi celkem líbí. Vrátil bych se časem, napravil bych chyby, musím říct, ta myšlenka se mi celkem líbí. Tak třeba včera kráčím si v robotu, přede mnou žil bez čicou a já si čistil botu. Mohl jsem tam někde v křovítiše stát, pak sám sebe před hodrem rychle varovat. Mohl jsem tam někde v křovítiše stát, pak sám sebe před hodrem rychle varovat. Místo toho vstávám každý den a život plyne jak neznámá řeka. Pokaždý, když z domova jdu ven, jsem vždycky rád, že netuším, co mě vlastně čeká. Místo toho vstávám každý den a život plyne jak neznámá řeka. Pokaždý, když z domova jdu ven, jsem vždycky rád, že netuším, co mě vlastně čeká. ráno vstanu a opařím se čajem, mít jenom tu možnost, spokojím se s málem, nejsem jako miska, stojíc na vole, co chce mír a jídlo pro děti v Angole. Nejsem jako miska, stojíc na vole, co chce mír a jídlo pro děti v Angole. Neříkám, že myšlenka je to zrovna špatná, proč jak velké cíle, být postava kladná, boží míry stojí, není se čeho bát, mohl bych si bez následků všeho užívat. Boží míry stojí, není se čeho bát, mohl bych si bez následků všeho užívat. Možností je rada, jak znalostí využít, je potřeba fantazie a taky trochu chtít. Mír celému světu nebo prachy do kapsy, záleží je na tom, co chceš, co si. Místo toho stávám každý den a život plyne, jak neznámá řeka. Pokaždý, když z domova jdu ven, jsem vždycky rád, že netuším. Místo toho stávám každý den a život plyne, jak neznámá řeka. Pokaždý, když z domova jdu ven, jsem vždycky rád, že netuším, co mě vlastně čeká.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.